The cold darkness of space held a terrible secret just beyond Neptune's orbit. 3,000 warships waited there in perfect formation. Each ship was massive, built for one purpose only: war. The Krathi Empire had sent its finest fleet to conquer another world. This time the target was a small blue planet called Earth. Commander Zalxeth stood on the bridge of his flagship. His 4 yellow eyes scanned the tactical displays with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. For 100 years his people had prepared for this day. 100 years of study, training, and preparation. The invasion of Earth would be the crowning achievement of his military career. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Each officer knew their role perfectly. They had practiced this invasion thousands of times in simulations. Every possible scenario had been considered. Every human defense strategy had been analyzed and countered. The Krathi military machine was thorough, efficient, and deadly. Zalxeth walked to the main view screen and stared at the distant sun. Somewhere near that yellow star was Earth, a primitive world, barely capable of space travel. Their broadcasts had revealed so much about them. The Krathi had intercepted radio signals, television programs, and military communications for decades. They knew everything about human warfare, human weapons, and human tactics. "Officer Kelvan," Zalxeth said to his second-in-command, "report on the invasion readiness." Kelvin approached with a data tablet. His scales gleamed under the bridge lights. "All ships report full combat readiness, Commander. Shields are at maximum efficiency. Plasma cannons are charged and ready. Ground forces are prepared for deployment. The jamming arrays are online and ready to blind their primitive satellites." "Excellent," Zalxeth replied. He felt a surge of pride. This fleet represented the finest military technology the Krathi Empire possessed. Against the primitive humans, it would be like using a plasma cannon to hunt small prey. Overwhelming. Decisive. Quick. The tactical officer called out from his station. "Commander, all fleet commanders are requesting permission to begin the advance." Zalxeth nodded slowly. This was the moment, the culmination of a century of planning. Send the order. All ships advance to Earth orbit. Maintain formation Delta 7. Activate jamming protocols as soon as we cross the orbit of their moon. We will strike at dawn over their major cities. The humans will surrender within days. The fleet began to move. 3,000 warships accelerated toward the inner solar system. Their engines created no visible light, no heat signature that primitive sensors could detect easily. They were ghosts moving through the void, bringing destruction with them. Zalxeth returned to his command chair and sat down. He remembered the briefings about Earth. The humans were a fractured species divided into hundreds of nations. They fought among themselves constantly. Their weapons were crude, based on chemical explosions and simple ballistics. Their largest weapons were atomic bombs, devices so primitive that Krathi shields could absorb the blast with minimal damage. "They will not know what hit them," Kelvan said, standing beside the command chair. "No, they will not," Zalxeth agreed. "Our intelligence reports indicate they have no unified planetary defense. Each nation maintains its own military. They will waste precious time arguing about who should respond, how to respond, whether to surrender or fight. By the time they organize any meaningful resistance, we will control their major cities." The view screen showed Earth growing larger as they approached. It looked peaceful from this distance. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. Soon it would belong to the Krathi Empire. The humans would be given a choice: submit and serve, or resist and perish. Most conquered species chose submission. It was the logical choice. "Sir, we are approaching lunar orbit," the navigation officer reported. "Estimated time to weapons range, 14 minutes. "Activate all jamming systems now," Zalxeth commanded. "Blind their satellites. Cut their communications. I want them confused and frightened when we arrive." Throughout the fleet, powerful jamming arrays came to life. Electromagnetic pulses flooded the space around Earth, disrupting satellites and communication networks. The first blow had been struck, and the humans would not even understand what was happening yet. Zalxeth allowed himself a moment of reflection. 47 worlds had fallen to the Krathi Empire, 47 different species, each thinking they could resist, each learning too late that resistance was futile. Earth would be number 48. The humans would learn the same lesson all the others had learned. The Krathi Empire had refined conquest into an art form. They studied their targets for decades before attacking. They learned languages, cultures, military capabilities. They knew their enemies better than the enemies knew themselves, and when the Krathi finally struck, victory was always assured. "All ships report ready for combat," Kelvin announced. "Ground forces are standing by for planetary assault. The invasion can proceed on your command." Zalxeth studied the tactical display one more time. Everything was perfect. The fleet was in position. The jamming was effective. The humans were blind and confused. In a few hours, the invasion would be complete. By tomorrow, Earth would be under Krathi control. "Begin final approach," he ordered. "All ships maintain maximum shields. Prepare to target their military installations, power generation facilities, and government centers. We strike hard, we strike fast, and we show no mercy to those who resist." The crew responded with efficient precision. This was what they had trained for. This was their purpose. The Krathi were born warriors, raised in a culture that valued military strength above all else. Every citizen served in the military. Every ship was crewed by experienced veterans. As the fleet crossed into the space between the moon and Earth, Zalxeth felt completely confident. The humans had no idea what was coming. Their primitive radar systems might detect the fleet soon, but by then it would be too late. No human weapon could threaten Krathi shields. No human ship could match Krathi speed or firepower. 10 minutes to weapons range, the tactical officer called out. Zalxeth gripped the arms of his command chair. 10 minutes until the battle began. 10 minutes until Earth fell.
He had waited his entire career for this moment.
Command of an invasion fleet was the highest honor a Krathi warrior could achieve. The bridge fell silent except for the quiet beeping of instruments and the low hum of the ship's engines. Every eye was on the view screen, watching Earth grow larger and larger. Soon, very soon, they would show the humans the true meaning of power. What Zalxeth did not know, what he could not have known, was that the humans had been preparing too. Not for 100 years, for much longer. And the weapons waiting for his fleet were nothing like what the Krathi had studied or anticipated. The next 6 minutes would change everything. The alarm started screaming at Peterson Space Force Base at exactly 3:47 in the morning. Captain Jake Morrison had been reviewing routine satellite reports when every screen in the control room suddenly turned red. He jumped out of his chair, coffee spilling across his desk. "What the hell is that?" he shouted over the alarm. Lieutenant Amy Chen was already at the main sensor console, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Her face had gone pale. "Sir, we have multiple contacts. Unknown origin. They just appeared beyond lunar orbit." "How many contacts?" Jake demanded, moving to stand behind her station. Amy's voice shook slightly. "Sir, the computer is still counting. So far, over 2,000. No, wait, 3,000 contacts. Mass signatures indicate capital ship-size vessels. Each one is bigger than an aircraft carrier." Jake felt his blood run cold. This was not a drill. This was not a malfunction. 3,000 unknown ships appearing near Earth meant only one thing. "Sound General Quarters. Get me NORAD headquarters right now." The control room exploded into activity. Officers ran to their stations. Screens lit up with data. Communication channels opened to military bases around the world. Within seconds, Jake was connected to the command center at NORAD headquarters in Cheyenne Mountain. "This is Captain Morrison at Peterson Space Force Base. We have a situation. Multiple unknown contacts, capital ship class, approaching from beyond lunar orbit. This is not a drill." "Repeat, this is not a drill." The response came immediately. "Confirmed, Peterson. We see them too." Every installation on the planet just lit up. "Stand by for further orders. The President is being notified now." Jake hung up and turned to his crew. "I want full spectrum analysis on those ships. Energy signatures, propulsion systems, weapon signatures, everything. Someone tell me what we're dealing with." Across the base, pilots scrambled to their aircraft. Ground crews prepared missiles and defensive systems. Everyone knew their training had just become terrifyingly real. Somewhere out in space, an alien fleet was approaching Earth. Whether they came in peace or war remained to be seen, but nobody was taking chances. At the White House, Secret Service agents burst into the residential quarters. President Margaret Lawson was already awake. Having received the emergency alert on her secure phone, she was pulling on her jacket as the agents arrived. "Madam President, we need to get you to the Situation Room immediately," the lead agent said. "I'm ready. Let's go." Margaret followed them through the hallways, her mind racing. She had been briefed on first contact scenarios during her first week in office. Every president received those briefings. But she had never really believed this day would come. The Situation Room was already packed with military advisors, intelligence officials, and cabinet members. Defense Secretary Harold Price stood at the main display screen, which showed a tactical view of Earth orbit and the approaching fleet. "Madame President," Harold said as she entered, "we have a situation. I can see that. Talk to me. What are we looking at?" General Patricia Gomez of the Space Force stepped forward. She was a veteran officer, calm under pressure. "Ma'am, approximately 3,000 unknown vessels have appeared in near-lunar space. Based on their trajectory and formation, this appears to be a military fleet. They are advancing toward Earth in attack formation." "Have they communicated?" Margaret asked. "No, ma'am. They've made no attempt to contact us. Instead, they've activated powerful jamming systems. We've lost contact with dozens of satellites. This is clearly a hostile action." Margaret looked at the display. 3,000 ships. The entire United States Navy had fewer than 300 vessels, and most of those were small patrol craft. This alien fleet could potentially overwhelm Earth through sheer numbers alone. "Options," she said simply. Patricia pulled up additional screens. "We have several defensive systems we can deploy. Some are publicly known. Others are classified programs that have been in development for decades. All of them are designed for scenarios just like this. How long until they're in weapons range?" "At current speed, 12 minutes, ma'am. 12 minutes." Margaret felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. Every human on Earth was counting on the people in this room to make the right choice. There was no time for lengthy debates or careful consideration. Action had to be taken now. "General Gomez, what's our most effective defensive option?" Patricia took a deep breath. "Protocol 7, ma'am. It activates the Sentinel network. These are orbital weapons platforms that officially don't exist. They've been hidden in plain sight for decades, disguised as defunct satellites and space debris. The platforms include kinetic weapons, directed energy systems, and advanced nuclear missiles. Have they been tested?" "Some systems have been tested individually at reduced power. But ma'am, we've never activated the entire network at once. We've never fired them at full capacity in combat conditions. This would be a field test under live fire." Margaret looked around the room at the faces of her advisors. She saw fear, yes, but also determination. These were good people, trained professionals who had prepared for this moment even if they never expected it to arrive. "If we don't activate Protocol 7, what happens?" she asked. Harold Price answered. "Best case scenario, they're here to talk and we've misunderstood their intentions. Worst case, they glass our major cities before we can mount any effective defense. Madam President, they've jammed our satellites. They're advancing in attack formation. They haven't tried to communicate. Everything about this screams hostile invasion." Margaret made her decision. "General Gomez, you have authorization to implement Protocol 7. Activate the Sentinel network. Defend our planet," Patricia straightened. "Yes, Madam President." She turned to her aide, a young major who looked terrified but focused. "Send the activation codes. All of them. Bring the Sentinel network online. Authorization comes directly from the President." The major hesitated for just a second. "Ma'am, some of those systems have never been live-fired. We don't know if they'll all work properly." "Then we're about to find out," Patricia replied. "Send the codes, now." The major began typing rapidly, entering codes from a secure tablet. Around the world, hidden systems came to life. In orbit around Earth, objects that had appeared to be dead satellites for years suddenly activated. Power systems engaged. Weapons came online. Targeting computers began tracking the approaching alien fleet. At Peterson Space Force Base, Jake Morrison watched his screens update with new data. "Holy hell," he whispered. "Lieutenant Chen, are you seeing this?" Amy nodded, her eyes wide. "Sir, dozens of orbital platforms just came online. I didn't even know we had that many satellites up there. The power signatures are incredible." "Those aren't regular satellites," Jake said quietly. "Those are weapons platforms. Big ones." Back in the Situation Room, Margaret watched the tactical display update. The orbital platforms were represented by green icons scattered around Earth's orbit. The alien fleet was shown in red, advancing steadily toward the planet. "Platforms are online and tracking targets," Patricia reported. "Weapons are charging. We'll be ready to fire in 90 seconds. Will it be enough?" Margaret asked. "Madam President, if these systems work as designed, we'll have the element of surprise. They don't know we have these weapons. They probably think we're still using chemical rockets and conventional missiles. If we can hit them hard enough in the first strike, we might break their formation, force them to retreat. And if we can't? Patricia met her eyes. Then we fight with everything we have left until there's nothing left to fight with. Margaret nodded. It was a simple answer, but it was honest. That was all she could ask for in this moment. Then let's show them what humanity is capable of. Fire when ready, General. The order went out across secure channels. In-orbit weapons platforms that had waited decades for this moment prepared to fire. Human ingenuity, born from centuries of warfare and competition, was about to meet an alien empire that had no idea what they were flying into. Commander Zalgzeth felt pleased as his fleet crossed lunar orbit. Everything was proceeding perfectly. The human satellites had been successfully jammed. Their communications were disrupted. Soon his forces would be in position to begin the bombardment of Earth's major cities. Within hours, the primitive humans would be begging for mercy. Sir, sensors are detecting energy spikes from multiple locations around the planet, his sensor officer reported. The young officer's voice carried a hint of uncertainty. Zalgzeth glanced at the tactical display. Several dozen points of light had appeared in orbit around Earth. They're defensive satellites, no doubt. Prepare to engage and destroy them when we enter effective range. How long until we can fire? 8 minutes, Commander. Excellent. Maintain course and speed. Zalgzeth was not concerned about Earth satellites. Karathi intelligence had thoroughly studied human space technology. Their satellites were primitive, barely capable of basic functions. Some carried simple telescopes, others communication equipment. A few might have crude weapons, but nothing that could threaten a Karathi warship. The Karathi shields were designed to withstand the most powerful weapons in the known galaxy. They could absorb the energy of nuclear explosions. They could deflect particle beams and plasma bolts. Human chemical rockets and explosive missiles would be like insects bouncing off armor plating. On the bridge of his flagship, Zalgzeth watched Earth grow larger on the view screen. He could see the continents now, the swirling patterns of clouds. It was a beautiful planet, really. It would make a fine addition to the Empire. The humans would be put to work in the resource extraction facilities, and their world would fuel the next phase of Karathi expansion. Sir, the energy signatures are increasing, the sensor officer said. Now there was definite concern in his voice. Power levels are climbing rapidly. I'm reading levels far beyond what our intelligence reports indicated were possible for human technology. Zalgzeth frowned. Explain. Sir, these power readings suggest fusion reactors or something even more advanced. But our intelligence files indicate humans have only primitive fission technology. These readings don't match our data. Perhaps their satellites have military reactors we didn't know about, Kelvin suggested. It changes nothing. Our shields will protect us. Zalgzeth nodded, but a small doubt began to form in his mind. Had the intelligence reports been wrong? Had the humans hidden their true capabilities? No, that seemed impossible. The Karathi had monitored Earth for decades. They had intercepted countless transmissions, studied human wars, analyzed their weapons. There had been no indication of advanced energy technology. At Peterson Space Force Base, Jake Morrison watched the countdown timer on his screen. 30 seconds until weapons release. Around the planet, 63 orbital platforms had locked onto targets in the alien fleet. Each platform had multiple weapons systems, all of them now charged and ready. All platforms report ready to fire, Lieutenant Amy Chen announced. Targets acquired and locked. Jake had his orders. Fire when ready. He looked at the alien fleet on his screen. 3,000 ships approaching his homeworld. Whatever came next, humanity would not go quietly. All platforms, you are authorized to engage. Fire at will. The first weapons to fire were the kinetic kill vehicles. These were not missiles. They carried no explosives, no warheads. They were simply tungsten rods. Each one weighing 20 tons, accelerated to enormous speeds by powerful electromagnetic launchers. The platforms had been built in secret over decades, using technology developed from old Strategic Defense Initiative research. What had started as a missile defense system had evolved into something far more deadly. The tungsten rods launched silently in the vacuum of space. There were dozens of them. Each one accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. At such velocities, mass became the weapon. The kinetic energy stored in 20 tons of metal moving at such speed was almost incomprehensible. A single rod carried more destructive force than a nuclear bomb. Commander Zalgzeth saw the launches on his tactical display. Incoming projectiles detected. All ships maintained shields at maximum. The rods covered the distance between Earth orbit and the alien fleet in seconds. They struck the Krathi warships with the force of meteors. The alien shields, designed to absorb energy and disperse explosive force, did absolutely nothing against solid matter traveling at relativistic speeds. The first rod punched through a Krathi battlecruiser's shield as if it wasn't there. It penetrated the hull, tore through internal compartments, and exited the other side. The kinetic energy transferred to the ship was so massive that the vessel simply disintegrated. Metal vaporized, atmosphere explosively decompressed. The crew died before they could even understand what had happened. More rods struck home. Each impact was catastrophic. Krathi warships exploded in brilliant flashes of light as their reactors breached. Others broke apart, massive sections of hull spinning away into space. Within 5 seconds, 47 Krathi vessels had been completely destroyed. Evasive maneuvers, Zalxith screamed. All ships scatter formation. Return fire! But the human attack had only begun. The second wave of weapons activated. These were directed energy platforms, each one mounting a powerful laser array. The lasers were not like anything that existed in public human technology. They were the products of classified research programs, powered by compact fusion reactors that generated enormous amounts of energy. Hundreds of invisible beams lanced across space. They were not simple cutting lasers. These were weapons designed to vaporize armor plating, to boil through metal and composite materials in microseconds. The beams focused on individual Krathi ships, concentrating enough energy to melt through hulls in seconds. Zalxith watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated around him. Ships were exploding everywhere. The tactical display was a nightmare of red indicators showing destroyed or crippled vessels. How was this possible? The humans were supposed to be primitive. Their weapons were supposed to be crude chemical devices. Where had these terrible weapons come from? Sir, we've lost over 1,000 ships, Kelvan shouted. Their weapons are cutting through our shields like they don't exist. We have no effective defense. The third wave of human weapons launched. These were missiles, but not the crude chemical rockets the Krathi had expected. They were advanced fusion warheads with magnetic confinement systems that focused the nuclear blast. Instead of radiating energy in all directions, these weapons directed their force like a shaped charge. They were designed to punch through the heaviest armor imaginable. The missiles streaked toward the alien fleet, their guidance systems locked on individual targets. Krathi point defense systems tried to shoot them down, but there were too many missiles coming from too many directions. The human platforms had been positioned all around Earth's orbit specifically for this kind of saturation attack. When the fusion warheads detonated, they created focused pulses of nuclear fire. The magnetic fields contained the blasts for microseconds, channeling the energy into devastating spears of destruction. Krathi ships caught in these blasts simply ceased to exist. Even vessels that survived the initial impact found their shields overloaded, their systems fried by the intense electromagnetic pulses. At the White House Situation Room, everyone watched the tactical display in stunned silence. The alien fleet was being torn apart. Ships were dying by the dozens, by the hundreds. The green icons representing human weapons platforms continued firing, methodically eliminating targets with brutal efficiency. Status report, President Margaret Lawson said quietly. General Patricia Gomez checked her data screens. Madam President, preliminary estimates indicate we've destroyed approximately 2,000 enemy vessels. The remaining ships are breaking formation. They appear to be retreating. Casualties on our side. 3 satellites destroyed by their initial jamming attack. No human casualties, no damage to the surface. They never got close enough to fire their weapons at us. Margaret sat back in her chair, trying to process what she had just witnessed. An alien invasion fleet 3,000 ships strong had been destroyed in minutes. The human race had just won its first interstellar war, and it had been a complete victory. Back in space, Commander Zalxith stared at his tactical display with disbelief. His mighty fleet, the pride of the Krathi Empire, had been reduced to scattered survivors desperately trying to escape. Over 90% of his ships were gone, thousands of warriors dead. The flagship itself had taken damage, and alarms were blaring throughout the bridge. Retreat, he ordered. All remaining ships maximum speed away from Earth. Jettison all non-essential equipment. Get us out of here! The surviving Krathi vessels turned and fled, their engines burning at maximum power. They left behind clouds of debris and the bodies of their dead. The invasion had lasted exactly 6 minutes from the first shot to the order to retreat. 6 minutes. 100 years of preparation destroyed in 6 minutes. The silence in the White House Situation Room was broken by someone starting to clap. Within seconds, the entire room erupted in applause and cheers. Military officers who had maintained strict professional composure for hours finally allowed themselves to show emotion. Some were crying. Others were embracing. The tension that had gripped everyone since the alien fleet appeared had suddenly released. President Margaret Lawson stood up and raised her hand for silence. The room gradually quieted down. Everyone, I understand the relief you're feeling. I feel it too. But this isn't over yet. We need to focus. General Gomez, I want a complete damage assessment. What did we lose and what did they lose? Patricia composed herself and consulted her data tablet. Yes, Madam President. On our side, we lost 3 communication satellites to their initial jamming attack. 2 other satellites were damaged but can be repaired. No orbital platforms were damaged. No surface installations were hit. 0 human casualties, and the enemy? Based on tracking data and visual confirmation from our remaining satellites, we destroyed approximately 2,700 alien vessels. Roughly 300 ships escaped and are currently fleeing the solar system at high speed. We're tracking them, but they'll be beyond our weapons range within the hour. Defense Secretary Harold Price shook his head in amazement. 90% casualties. That's not a battle. That's a massacre. It was a massacre, Patricia agreed. But we didn't start it. They came here to invade us. We defended ourselves, Margaret nodded. Agreed. Now what about the debris field? I assume there's wreckage out there? Yes, ma'am. Thousands of pieces of debris, ranging from small fragments to large sections of intact hull. Some of the alien ships were completely vaporized by our weapons, but many left substantial wreckage. This represents an incredible intelligence opportunity. We can study their technology, their weapons, their propulsion systems. Make it a priority, Margaret ordered. I want recovery teams assembled immediately. Bring back everything we can safely retrieve. And someone get NASA on the line. We need to start thinking about expanding our defensive perimeter. If one alien fleet found us, others might come. Madam President, Harold interjected, we should also consider the political implications. The entire world just witnessed an alien invasion attempt. Every nation with satellite capabilities saw what happened. We need to coordinate with international allies, share information, and present a unified human response. Margaret sighed. He was right, of course. The diplomatic challenges ahead would be enormous. Set up calls with world leaders. We'll need an emergency session of the United Nations, and someone prepare a statement for the press. The public deserves to know what happened and that they're safe. At Peterson Space Force Base, Captain Jake Morrison was coordinating the recovery operations. Teams were already preparing spacecraft to retrieve debris from the battlefield. Every piece of alien technology would be valuable for understanding what humanity had just faced. Captain Morrison, Lieutenant Amy Chen called from her station. We're receiving a distress signal. It's coming from near Jupiter. The signal is using what appears to be a mathematical sequence, possibly an attempt at basic communication. Jake moved to her station and looked at the data. Is it from one of the alien ships? Yes, sir. Based on the signal strength and location, it appears to be from a damaged vessel. The ship's life support may be failing. Jake thought about it for a moment. The aliens had come to Earth to invade, to conquer, but they were also living beings who were now in distress. Get me General Gomez at NORAD. She needs to make this call. Within minutes, the decision came back from the White House. Send a rescue mission. If the aliens were willing to surrender, humanity would accept and treat them according to international laws regarding prisoners of war. It was important to show that humans fought only when necessary, but treated defeated enemies with dignity. A small task force of spacecraft launched from various bases, heading toward Jupiter. The journey would take several days, but the alien distress signal indicated their life support could hold that long. When the human ships arrived, they found a damaged Krathi cruiser drifting in space. The ship was dead, its power gone, its crew surviving on emergency backup systems. Commander Zalkseth watched the human ships approach through a small viewport. He felt a mixture of shame and curiosity. Shame that he had led his fleet to such a devastating defeat. Curiosity about what the humans would do now. Would they kill their defeated enemies? Torture them for information? Enslave them as the Krathi would have done to conquered humans? The human ships docked with the crippled cruiser. Teams in spacesuits entered through the airlocks. They moved cautiously but not aggressively. When they found Zalxeth and his surviving crew, they offered medical assistance and emergency supplies. The humans' weapons were ready, yes, but they were not firing. They were helping. Zalxeth was transported to Earth along with his officers and crew. They were taken to a secure but comfortable facility. The rooms were clean, well lit, and maintained at a temperature suitable for Krathi biology. Medical personnel checked everyone for injuries. Food was provided, carefully prepared based on analysis of Krathi nutritional needs. It was nothing like what Zalxeth had expected. The humans were treating them as prisoners of war, not as slaves or specimens to be experimented on. They were being treated with basic dignity and respect, even though they had come to conquer Earth. 3 weeks passed. Human scientists worked around the clock analyzing the recovered alien technology. Linguists studied the Krathi language, which was complex but ultimately decipherable. A translation device was developed, allowing basic communication between humans and their prisoners. Ambassador Richard Lang was chosen to conduct the first formal interview with Commander Zalxeth. Richard was a career diplomat, experienced in negotiating with difficult personalities and foreign cultures. Though nothing in his career had prepared him for negotiating with an actual alien, he approached the task with the same professionalism he brought to everything. Richard entered the interview room where Zalxeth waited. The Krathi commander was impressive even in defeat. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his scales a deep green color, his 4 eyes watching Richard with obvious intelligence. "Commander Zalxeth," Richard said, sitting down across a simple table. A translation device sat between them. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." "I had little choice," Zalxeth replied through the translator. His voice was deep and carried well even through the electronic device. "I am your prisoner." "You are a prisoner of war," Richard corrected gently. "There's a difference. You will be treated according to our laws and international conventions. You will not be harmed or mistreated." Zalxeth's 4 eyes blinked in what might have been surprise. "Why, we came to conquer you. To enslave your people. You would have every right to execute us." "That's not how we do things," Richard replied. "We defend ourselves when necessary, but we don't commit war crimes, even against enemies." "Interesting." Zalxeth sat down in a chair designed to accommodate his larger frame. "You are not what we expected, Ambassador Lang." "I could say the same about you, Commander. Your empire spent 100 years preparing to invade Earth. Obviously, something went very wrong with your plans. I'd like to understand what happened from your perspective." Zalxeth was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to speak, and Richard listened carefully as the alien commander explained the Krathi Empire's methods. They studied their targets for decades. They analyzed broadcasts, intercepted communications, observed from a distance. They built detailed profiles of their enemies, understanding their weapons, their tactics, their capabilities. "We thought we knew everything about you," Zalxeth said. "We watched your wars, your World War II, your Cold War. We analyzed your nuclear weapons, your missiles, your aircraft. We prepared to face those weapons. We never imagined you possessed technology so far beyond what you displayed publicly. The weapons we used against you," Richard said carefully. "They were built over many years. Some of the research started decades ago during our Cold War. We built them expecting to fight each other, not aliens. But when you appeared, we simply used what we had." "You built weapons that might never be used?" "Yes, we call it deterrence." "Or insurance. The idea is that if everyone knows you have terrible weapons, they won't attack you. And if they do attack, you can defend yourself." Zalxeth shook his head slowly. "The Krathi build weapons when we need them. For specific enemies. You build weapons for hypothetical threats. For enemies that might not even exist. We've spent our entire history fighting each other," Richard explained. "We've gotten very good at it. Maybe too good. When you appeared, we just applied the same thinking to you that we've always applied to each other." "You are a species of warriors," Zalxeth observed. "Not just soldiers, but warriors. You think about war constantly, even in peace. You prepare for battles that may never come. You develop weapons beyond your immediate needs. This is not normal behavior for most species." Richard considered that. "Maybe not. But it kept us alive when you came calling." "Indeed it did." Zalxeth looked directly at Richard with all 4 eyes. "Ambassador, I must tell you something important. My empire will not return to Earth." Over the following weeks, the interviews with Commander Zalxeth continued. Each conversation revealed more about the Krathi Empire and their methods of conquest. Ambassador Richard Lang compiled detailed reports that were distributed to world leaders and military planners. The information was invaluable for understanding what humanity might face in the future. During one particularly long session, Zalxith explained the full scope of Krathi expansion. The Empire had conquered 47 worlds before attempting Earth. Each conquest followed a similar pattern. Study the target for decades, understand their capabilities, plan the invasion down to the smallest detail, attack with overwhelming force, accept surrender and incorporate the conquered population into the Empire. It always worked, Zalxith said, his voice carrying a note of confusion even weeks after the defeat. Every species we encountered fought with the weapons of their current era. If we studied them for 50 years, they might advance their technology somewhat during that time. But the changes were predictable, linear. We could plan for their improvements. But not with us, Richard said. No, not with you. Zalxith shifted in his seat. The chair creaked under his weight. You humans are different. You don't just improve existing weapons, you create entirely new categories of weapons. Your kinetic weapons, they were theoretical concepts 50 years ago. Now they're operational. Your laser platforms, the same story. You take ideas and turn them into reality at a pace we couldn't predict. It's what we do, Richard replied. Competition drives innovation. We compete with each other constantly. In business, in science, in military development. The pace can be exhausting, but it keeps pushing us forward. And you hide your developments, Zalxith added. Your most advanced weapons were secret. We saw your civilian technology, your public military hardware. And we thought that was the extent of your capabilities. We didn't account for hidden programs, classified projects, secret developments. Richard nodded. During the Cold War, both major powers developed extensive classified weapons programs. Some of those programs continued even after the Cold War ended. The orbital platforms that destroyed your fleet were the product of research going back decades. They were built in secret, hidden among regular satellites and space debris. Even most humans didn't know they existed. A logical strategy, Zalxith admitted, but it makes you very difficult enemies. How can anyone plan to fight you when they don't know what weapons you possess? They can't, Richard said simply. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the best defense is making potential enemies think twice before attacking. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. A military aide entered and handed Richard a secure tablet. Sir, this just came through from the analysis team. They thought you'd want to see it immediately. Richard read the message on the tablet, his eyebrows rising. Commander, it seems our scientists have made progress translating your ship's database. They've found star charts and what appears to be information about the Krathi Empire's location and territory. Zalxith's scales seemed to pale slightly. I see. Don't worry, Richard assured him. We're not planning a counter-invasion. But this information is valuable for understanding the larger galactic situation. Are there other empires like yours out there? Other species we should be aware of? Yes, Zalxith said after a moment. The galaxy is more crowded than you might think. There are dozens of spacefaring civilizations. Most are peaceful traders. Some, like the Krathi, are more aggressive. And there are others, worse than us, who view all other species as resources to be exploited or destroyed. Then humanity needs to be prepared, Richard said. We were lucky this time. Your empire studied old broadcasts and prepared to fight the humans of the 20th century. The next threat might be smarter, might gather more current intelligence, might not underestimate us. They would be fools to underestimate you now, Zalxith replied. What you did to my fleet, that will be talked about. Stories will spread. Humanity destroyed a Krathi invasion force in 6 minutes without suffering a single casualty. That kind of victory becomes legend. Other species will hear about it and adjust their behavior accordingly. Richard considered that. You think others were watching? Probably. Space is vast, but news travels. There are likely monitoring stations, automated probes, scout ships from various civilizations observing interesting worlds like Earth. They will have detected our fleet's arrival and its destruction. By now, reports are probably spreading across multiple star systems. This was troubling information. Richard made a note to include it in his next report to President Lawson. If the galaxy was full of watchers, then humanity's debut on the interstellar stage had been dramatic and violent. That could be good, establishing humanity as a power not to be trifled with. Or it could be bad, making Earth a target for species who saw the humans as a threat. Meanwhile, across Earth, the recovery and analysis efforts continued. Hundreds of scientists and engineers worked on the alien technology retrieved from the debris field. Every piece of wreckage was carefully studied. The Krathi had used advanced materials in their ship construction. Their power systems were efficient and compact. Their weapons, though ineffective against human defenses, were still impressive pieces of engineering. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, Dr. Kevin Parker led a team studying an intact Krathi reactor recovered from a damaged ship. The reactor was small, barely larger than a car, but it generated enormous amounts of power using a fusion process humanity had only theorized about. If we can understand how this works, Kevin explained to his team, we could revolutionize space travel. This reactor produces 10 times the power of our best designs at a fraction of the size and weight. His colleague, Dr. Lisa Monroe, examined the control systems. The computing architecture is fascinating too. It's completely different from how we design systems, but it's incredibly efficient. If we can adapt some of these principles, we could improve our own technology significantly. Similar scenes played out at research facilities around the world. The alien technology was being carefully studied, not to copy it directly, but to understand the principles behind it. Humanity was learning from the Krathi, taking their ideas and adapting them to human needs and human engineering approaches. At the Pentagon, military planners were already working on the next generation of defensive systems. The Sentinel network had proven effective, but it had also revealed weaknesses. The platforms were powerful but limited in number. They could defend against a fleet approaching from one direction. But what if the next threat came from multiple directions simultaneously? What if the enemy was faster, more agile, harder to target? General Patricia Gomez chaired a meeting of top military and civilian leaders. We won this battle, but we can't assume the next one will be so straightforward. We need to expand our defensive network. More platforms, better coverage, improved weapons. We also need to consider offensive capabilities, the ability to project power beyond Earth orbit. That's a significant escalation, noted Admiral Christopher Blake of the Navy. Are we talking about building warships? Actual military spacecraft capable of fighting beyond our solar system? We're talking about options, Patricia replied. Right now we can defend Earth, that's good. But if the next threat gathers its forces beyond our weapons range and plans a more careful approach, we need the ability to meet them before they reach our planet. The discussion continued for hours, touching on budgets, timelines, international cooperation, and dozens of other factors. Building a space navy would require enormous resources and global cooperation on an unprecedented scale. But the alternative, remaining vulnerable to future threats, was unacceptable. Back at the secure facility housing the Krathi prisoners, Commander Zalkseth was given access to basic information about current events on Earth. He read news reports about the global response to the invasion attempt. The United Nations had called an emergency session. World leaders were pledging cooperation on space defense. Nations that had been rivals were suddenly discussing joint military projects. You're uniting, Zalkseth observed during his next meeting with Ambassador Richard Lang. Before our arrival, your species was divided into competing nations. Now you're coming together. Common threats have a way of focusing attention, Richard said. You made us realize that our petty disagreements look very small when faced with existential dangers from space. We're not suddenly one happy family. We still have differences and conflicts, but we're learning to work together on the big issues. Another unexpected result, Zalkseth said. The Krathi Empire intended to conquer a divided humanity. Instead, we may have helped create a united one. Our strategist will find this development very ironic. Life is full of irony, Richard agreed. Commander, I want to ask you something personal. Do you regret the invasion? If you could go back and change the decision, would you? Zalkseth was quiet for a long time. His four eyes looked at something far away, perhaps remembering his crew, his ships, the warriors who had died following his orders. Yes, he finally said. I regret it deeply. Not because we lost, though that is painful. I regret it because it was wrong. We came to conquer a people who had done nothing to us. We justified it with ideas of empire, eh? 6 months after the battle, the world had changed in ways both obvious and subtle. Construction had begun on new orbital platforms with international cooperation that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. The United Nations had established a new organization called the Planetary Defense Initiative, tasked with coordinating Earth's defenses against future extraterrestrial threats. At a secure communications facility in Geneva, technicians prepared to send humanity's first intentional message into deep space. The message had been carefully crafted by linguists, diplomats, and scientists. It would be broadcast toward the Krathi homeworld using a powerful transmitter built specifically for this purpose. President Margaret Lawson stood in the control room, watching the final preparations. Beside her were leaders from dozens of nations, all of whom had approved the message. This was humanity speaking with one voice, something that rarely happened in human history. "We're ready, Madam President," the chief technician said. "The message is loaded and the transmitter is at full power. On your command." Margaret looked at the text of the message displayed on a screen. It was simple and direct, translated into the Krathi language using the knowledge gained from Commander Zalseth and the recovered databases. The message said exactly what humanity wanted to say to the galaxy. "Send it," Margaret ordered. The technician pressed a button. Deep space transmitters around the world activated simultaneously, focusing their combined power into a single coherent message broadcast toward Krathi space. The message would take years to arrive, traveling at the speed of light across the vast distances between stars. But eventually it would be received. The message read, "To the Krathi Empire and any others who may intercept this transmission, we are humanity, inhabitants of the planet Earth and the Sol system. Your invasion fleet arrived at our world 6 months ago with hostile intent. We destroyed that fleet in defense of our home. This message serves as both explanation and warning. We do not seek war. We do not desire conquest, but we will defend ourselves with absolute resolve against any who threaten us. We have treated your captured warriors with honor and dignity. They will be returned to you unharmed when arrangements can be made. We hope this can be the beginning of peaceful relations between our species. However, if you or any other civilization approaches Earth with hostile intent, you will face the same fate as your invasion fleet. We know where you are. We have the capability to reach you. Choose peace and we will be grateful neighbors. Choose war, and you will discover what a species that has spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare is truly capable of. The choice is yours." Signed, the people of Earth. The message broadcast continuously for 24 hours, ensuring it would be impossible to miss for anyone monitoring communications in that region of space. Then the transmitters fell silent and humanity waited to see what response would come, if any response came at all. At Peterson Space Force Base, Captain Jake Morrison had been promoted to major and given command of the newly formed Space Defense Squadron. His job was to coordinate the orbital platforms and the new spacecraft being built for Earth's defense. It was a massive responsibility, but Jake felt ready for it. The battle 6 months ago had shown him what was at stake. "Major Morrison," Lieutenant Amy Chen called from her monitoring station. She had been promoted too, now serving as his executive officer. "We're tracking an anomaly near the orbit of Mars. Unknown object, small, moving at high speed toward Earth." Jake immediately went alert. "Is it a ship? A missile? What are we looking at?" "Too small to be a ship, sir. It's transmitting a signal, a repeating pattern. It appears to be mathematical, possibly another attempt at communication. Sound general alert. Track it. If it makes any threatening moves, we take it out." The object continued toward Earth, making no aggressive maneuvers. As it got closer, better sensors could analyze it. The object was a probe, clearly artificial, about the size of a small car. It carried no weapons. Its signal was indeed an attempt at communication, broadcasting mathematical sequences that could be interpreted as peaceful greetings. "It's not from the Krathi," Amy reported after analyzing the design. "The materials and construction are completely different. This is from someone else." Jake ordered the probe intercepted by a recovery spacecraft. When the probe was brought to Earth and opened carefully, it contained data storage devices and what appeared to be a message in multiple formats. Scientists worked for days to decode the contents. When they finally succeeded, the message was both exciting and concerning. The probe was from a civilization calling themselves the Valon Collective. They had been monitoring Earth for several years, observing human development with interest. The message congratulated humanity on successfully defending against the Krathi invasion. It offered to establish diplomatic relations and share information about the broader galactic community. However, it also included a warning. The message explained that the galaxy was home to hundreds of civilizations at various levels of development. Most were peaceful, interested in trade and cultural exchange. But some were aggressive, viewing other species as threats or resources. The Krathi were relatively minor players in galactic politics. There were worse threats out there, civilizations with more advanced technology and greater military power. The Valon wanted to help humanity prepare for this larger reality. They offered to share star charts, information about known civilizations, and guidance on galactic diplomatic protocols. In exchange, they asked only for friendship and the possibility of future cooperation. President Lawson called together her advisors to discuss this new development. The Situation Room that had been the scene of such tension 6 months ago was now focused on a different kind of challenge. How should humanity respond to this offer? Could the Valon be trusted? Was this a genuine offer of friendship or something more sinister? "We need more information," said Secretary of State Barbara Hughes. "We can't make an informed decision without understanding who these Valon are and what they really want." "Agreed," Margaret said. "But we also can't ignore this opportunity. If the galaxy really is full of civilizations more powerful than the Krathi, we need allies. We need knowledge. We can't afford to remain isolated." General Patricia Gomez added her perspective. "From a military standpoint, intelligence about potential threats is invaluable. Even if we don't fully trust the Valon, the information they offer could help us prepare for future challenges. We should engage with them cautiously, but we should engage." After hours of discussion, the decision was made. Earth would respond to the Valon offer positively but carefully. Diplomatic contact would be established. Information would be shared, but Earth's most sensitive military secrets would remain protected. Humanity would step carefully into the larger galactic community, eyes open, weapons ready, but hand extended in friendship. "Commander," Zalxeth was informed of this development during one of his regular meetings with Ambassador Richard Lang. The Krathi officer listened carefully as Richard explained the Valon contact and humanity's planned response. "The Valon are old," Zalxeth said thoughtfully. "Their civilization has existed for thousands of your years. They are generally trustworthy, at least based on Krathi intelligence files. If they offer friendship, they likely mean it. But they are also pragmatic. They see value in an alliance with humanity." "Because of how we defeated your fleet?" Richard asked. "Yes. You demonstrated military capability that surprised everyone, including species far more advanced than the Krathi. The Valon are thinking strategically. An alliance with humanity gives them a powerful potential ally. You should accept their offer but remain cautious. Trust but verify, as one of your leaders once said." Richard smiled. "That's good advice. Commander, I have news for you as well. Your government has responded to our message. They agreed to a prisoner exchange. You and your surviving crew will be returned to Krathi space aboard a neutral vessel provided by the Valon Collective. The exchange will happen in 3 months. Zalxeth's 4 eyes showed surprise. "They are taking us back? The Empire accepts us even after such a defeat?" "According to their message, you and your crew fought bravely in an impossible situation. The failure was not yours but belonged to the intelligence services who provided inaccurate information. You'll be debriefed certainly, but you won't be punished." "That is unexpected but welcome news," Zalxeth said. "Ambassador, I want to thank you for your treatment of us during our captivity. You showed honor when you had no obligation to do so. This is something I will report to my superiors." "You're welcome, Commander. I hope this can be the beginning of better relations between our peoples. We fought each other, yes, but that doesn't mean we have to remain enemies." In the following weeks, preparations began for the prisoner exchange and for humanity's first official diplomatic contact with an alien civilization. The location chosen was a neutral point in space, far from both Earth and Krathi territory. The Valon would provide the meeting place and facilitate the exchange. On the day of the exchange, Commander Zalxeth and his crew boarded a shuttle that would take them to the Valon vessel. Before leaving, Zalxeth had one final meeting with Ambassador Richard Lang and President Margaret Lawson. "Commander,